There comes a moment in history when everything seems decided, but in reality, it's only beginning to fall apart. At the height of Nazi Germany's power, when maps were being redrawn at a terrifying speed and entire armies were simply disappearing, the world was witnessing a silsila of victories that felt unstoppable. Under the command of Adolf Hitler, the lightning war strategy crushed nations in a matter of days, creating the illusion that the outcome of the conflict was already sealed. But it is exactly at this point, when confidence reaches its peak, that the most dangerous mistakes are made. And it was in this very moment that a decision began to take shape. A decision that seemed logical, strategic, even inevitable. But in reality, it carried within it the beginning of the fall of an empire. To understand why this decision was so catastrophic, you need to look beyond the battlefield and step inside the mind of the man in command. Hitler did not see the war as just territorial expansion. In his view, there was an enemy that had to be eliminated at all costs: the Soviet Union. Led by Joseph Stalin, the USSR represented not only a military obstacle but an ideological threat that, in Nazi thinking, could not coexist with their vision of the world. And so, one of the most ambitious operations in history was born: Operation Barbarossa. This was not just another campaign, it was an all-in gamble. A move that risked everything in exchange for a fast and decisive victory. When the invasion began, the scale of it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Millions of soldiers advancing simultaneously, tanks moving like an unstoppable steel wave, aircraft dominating the skies. In the early days, it seemed like history was repeating itself. Cities fell quickly, Soviet forces were caught off guard and forced into chaotic retreats. To outside observers, it looked like yet another inevitable German victory. But there was a detail, almost invisible at first, that would change everything. Unlike the countries that had fallen before, the Soviet Union was not just another target. It was vast, complex, and above all, resilient. And as German forces pushed deeper, something began to work against them: distance. The further the German army advanced, the more stretched their supply lines became. Fuel, ammunition, food. Everything had to travel enormous distances to reach the front lines. In a war of this scale, even small delays could become deadly. But the real problem was still ahead. Instead of focusing all their strength on a single objective, Hitler began dividing his forces. Some moved north, others south, while the main push started losing momentum. This decision, which seemed strategic, cost Germany something it could not afford to lose: time. And while that time slipped away, Joseph Stalin was doing the opposite, reorganizing his forces, relocating entire industries, and preparing a counteroffensive that would change the course of the war. Then, without warning, it arrived. The Russian winter, not as a simple obstacle, but as a brutal force that transformed everything. Temperatures dropped to extreme levels, freezing weapons, disabling vehicles, and turning survival itself into a daily battle. German troops, unprepared for such conditions, began to suffer losses without even engaging the enemy. And at that moment, the balance began to shift. Soviet forces, accustomed to the harsh climate, launched increasingly powerful counterattacks. What had once been a rapid advance turned into desperate resistance, and what looked like certain victory began to unravel. In the middle of this chaos, one name would become the symbol of the turning point: the Battle of Stalingrad. There, the war reached a level of brutality that is almost impossible to imagine. Fighting took place street by street, building by building, every inch of ground fiercely contested. The German army, once seen as invincible, began to show clear signs of exhaustion. Surrounded, undersupplied, and facing extreme conditions, thousands of soldiers found themselves trapped with no escape. And then something happened that few believed was possible: surrender. An entire German army defeated. This was not just a loss, it was the collapse of an illusion. From that point on, nothing was the same. Germany was now fighting a massive war on two fronts, draining resources at an unsustainable rate. At the same time, the Allies were growing stronger, gaining time and strategic advantage. The entry of the United States added an industrial and military power that Germany could not match. Each new battle became harder, each advance more costly, each mistake more damaging. What was once total dominance turned into a constant struggle to delay the inevitable. And all of it could be traced back to that initial decision, the moment when control was lost and the course of the war became irreversible. But perhaps the most important lesson of this entire story lies not only in what happened, but in the pattern behind it. The mistake was not just the invasion, it was the underestimation. Underestimating the enemy, the land, the climate, and most of all, the limits of control. Great defeats rarely happen all at once. They begin small, almost invisible, and grow until they can no longer be stopped. And that is exactly what happened here. Operation Barbarossa was not just a military campaign. It was the beginning of a collapse that could no longer be avoided. And when we look back now, with everything already decided, one thing becomes clear. The greatest mistake of Adolf Hitler was not just a military decision. It was a choice made at the height of confidence, when everything seemed to be working. And that is where the real danger lies. Because sometimes, it is not weakness that destroys empires, but the illusion that they are too strong to ever fall.